My name is Cassia Rook, 28 years old. The obstetrics corridor hummed that thin, fluorescent whine that always makes hospitals feel like they're thinking. Cool gel slicked my skin. The probe slid, and the monitor unfurled a constellation, grain and shadow, a tiny jawline, a thrum like a distant drummer. "Everything looks excellent," Dr. Carter said, pen tapping the chart with a practiced lightness. "Measurements on track. Congratulations, you're having a baby boy." I had imagined those words for years. They landed warm as sunlight after rain, after plastic sticks hidden in the trash, after 2 quiet memorials I held alone with the shower running so no one could hear me break. I breathed in, tasted relief and disbelief at once. A boy. Our boy. I traced the little crescent of a skull on the printout. The technician pointed to clenched fingers, the quick engine of his heart, that stubborn outline of a chin already trying to look like his father's. Dr. Carter reminded me to book in 4 weeks. I nodded too hard, as if enthusiasm could pin this luck in place. I told her the nausea had eased. I told her Hudson had set a mini fridge by the bed so I could reach ginger ale at 3 a.m. I even smiled when I said, "He's going to be a great dad." She smiled back the way good doctors do, kind, neutral, believing what brings calm. The elevator down felt like descending inside a bubble. I held the photos against my chest and rehearsed the reveal. He'd lift me, spin me, we'd say a name we didn't yet agree on and pretend we had. The doors parted and the lobby swallowed me. Polished floors, old magazines, a child whining for a lollipop. No Hudson by the windows. He'd said he might step out for air if it ran long. He hates the AC after heat. I texted, "Coming down." My thumb hovered, then I slipped the phone away and drifted toward the exit. The alcove near the elevators has 2 chairs, a low table, a plant that's never convincingly alive. I turned the corner and heard him. Hudson's voice, low and soft, the register he used on me when we were new. The timing couldn't be better, Flo. She's focused on the baby. The photos crackled in my fist. Florence. He called her Flo, like the old days, like when we were 3 inseparable people, and everything we shared felt harmless. Flo, my best friend, my maid of honor, the one who brought soup on the days the world felt too heavy to digest. I flattened my back to the wall, pulse thudding in my ears so loudly I almost missed her answer. "Are you sure about doing this now?" Florence asked, voice barely over a whisper. "She's so happy today." "After what?" Hudson's softness hardened a notch. "After the birth? After we're tied forever?" A pause, then a quiet hiss of breath. "I can't keep pretending." The floor tilted. My hand loosened. The printouts fell, fanning over the gleam of the tile. A passerby glanced down at the scattered galaxies of my sun, and then away, polite, unaware that the axis of my life had slipped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The alcove was a blind corner. They couldn't see me. I could hear everything. "But the baby," Florence said. "Her baby." "Our baby," Hudson corrected. The world narrowed to the words. The hum of lights receded. "The one you're carrying is mine, Flo. That's the family I want." The air thinned until I could taste metal. The boy whose heartbeat I'd just watched, our miracle after years of trying, was an obstacle to him now. "When will you tell her?" Florence's voice trembled. "You said after the appointment." "Tonight," he said flat. "I already called a lawyer. With her history and the stress, there's a chance she might, well." He let the rest dangle like a plan he'd already rehearsed. I slid down the wall until the cold seeped into my spine. I pressed my palm over my mouth so the animal noise trapped in my chest wouldn't erupt into the bright, ordinary lobby. My photos lay around me like fallen leaves, and in each one my son floated, serene as the moon. Hudson went on, practical as a shopping list, asset division, the house, fresh start. Florence, my Florence, murmured that she felt terrible, that I'd always been understanding, too understanding. I tasted something bitter and old, the memory of my father's voice when I was small and tried to be kind to a mean dog. "You need edges, Cass. The world bites. You need teeth." They shifted, footsteps brushing the tile. "I should get back," Hudson said. "She'll come out with news. I need to look excited." "What if it's bad?" Florence asked, barely audible. "Then it's easier," he said. The words struck bone. They moved off. I gathered the photos one by one, smoothing them like apologies. My hands had stopped shaking. The crying woman I'd been 10 minutes ago had drowned. A quieter creature stood up in her place. I walked to the bathroom on legs that felt borrowed, ran water cold enough to sting, and practiced my smile in the mirror until it obeyed. Hudson waited by the windows, phone in his hand, his loving husband face clipped on like a visitor's badge. "There she is," he said, pulling me close. He smelled like aftershave and lies. "Everything go okay?" "Perfect," I said, and for once I meant it differently than he thought. "We're having a boy." For a heartbeat, his face flickered, joy, guilt, calculation, a bad actor missing his mark and correcting. "A boy," he said, brightening. He lifted me, spun me, kissed my temple while strangers smiled the smile people give a scene they think they understand. "Let me see him." He took the images and stared like he was trying to recognize a stranger in a crowd. "He's strong," he said. "Like his father," I said sweetly, and watched the way the compliment made him flinch. "Dr. Carter says 22 weeks and perfect." His mouth formed agreement, but his eyes were far away. "We should celebrate tonight. Romanos?" Romanos, the place of our happy markers. Proposal night under strings of lights. Anniversaries layered like sugar. The temple of comfort food after every failure. "I'd love that," I said. "Should we invite Florence? She's been so supportive." His jaw tightened half a degree, the kind of micro-expression you learn only when your heart has been broken and you're looking for screws to unwind it. "Maybe just us tonight," he said lightly. "Make it special." "You're right," I said, threading my arm through his. "Just us." In traffic, he floated baby names, as if he weren't carrying a detonator in his pocket. "Something classic," he mused. "William? James?" "I like names with roots," I said, watching his profile as the city slid by. "What about your grandfather's? Theodore." His hands tightened on the wheel like he'd remembered a bruise. "Feels heavy for a baby." "You're right," I said cheerfully. "We have time." I placed my palm low over the firm curve of my belly. My son answered with the smallest flutter, like a secret handshake. The moment touched something fierce inside me. I imagined a future where this child grew, without wondering if he was wanted. I imagined all the ways I could build that world with or without the man next to me. Romanos smelled like roasted garlic and old vows. We sat at our corner table. He ordered wine for himself and sparkling water for me, the theater immaculate. "To our son," he said, lifting the glass. "To our family," I answered, and let the words resonate longer than they should. He drank too quickly, his phone lit, screen down. I watched the muscle in his cheek jump when it buzzed again. "Hudson," I said lightly, "you're quiet." "Just thinking," he said. "About schools, space. Maybe we should move. Fresh start." There it was, his euphemism trying to sprout. "Where did you have in mind?" I asked. He improvised a geography of maybes. I nodded like a woman considering paint colors. "I'll miss Florence," I said, slow and warm. "She's practically family." He smiled too tightly. "We'll figure it out." I let the conversation drift. I asked about nursery paint. I made a joke about baby socks being like lost apologias from the dryer gods. He laughed on cue. Twice. I set my phone on the table and thumbed a message to Florence, then locked the screen before sending it and said, "I promise to update her." Twice he said, "Later, too fast." After tiramisu, he tried to begin. "Cassia, there's something..." He smoothed his napkin flat, folded, unfolded. A junior high boy with a confession letter he didn't want to sign. "About the future." "Hmm?" I tilted my head and softened my eyes the way you do for skittish creatures. "Let's table it," he said finally. Queasy smile returned. "Tonight is happy." "Of course," I said, and gave him the smile I'd practiced in the mirror. The one that looks like forgiveness from across the room. At home, he fled to his office for emails. I walked upstairs and placed the ultrasound photos in a fan on my dresser, like little shields. In the quiet, I could hear him on the phone below. Low, urgent, old habits. His voice drops when he's worried. He paces by the window when he wants to feel larger than a problem. Made it easy to picture him. I sat on the edge of the bed we had made and unmade our marriage in, and opened my laptop. Information first. Rage later. I made folders with boring names, baby planning, receipts, dates. I pulled bank statements from our joint account and scrolled. Jewelry I'd never worn, hotel charges within our zip code, two-person dinners at places he'd dismissed as too sceney for us. On Florence's feed, I found a March weekend that aligned too neatly with one of his conferences. A coy caption about sunsets that matched the restaurant view he'd once used to convince me life was full of second chances. Screenshots went into the folder like beads on a wire. Not enough by itself, but patterns always tell the truth eventually. My phone buzzed. Florence, checking in, sweet concern with a soft emoji. I stared, then typed back something gentle and unremarkable. I imagined her apartment, the mess of prenatal vitamins and unopened mail, the mirror she probably avoided. I imagined the baby inside her, innocent to all of this. The anger in me twisted into a cleaner line. Protect mine. Do not be outmaneuvered. Get proof. I thought of my father again, how he loved me and still warned me that I wore softness like a welcome mat. You need edges, he'd say, and the patience to wait until using them matters. I didn't understand then that patience could be a blade. When Hudson climbed into bed past midnight, his phone thrummed on the nightstand. 3 short buzzes in a row, the anxious rhythm of someone typing, deleting, typing again. He breathed theatrically as if deep sleep could absolve him. I lay with my eyes open and counted the space between vibrations. 3 messages, then silence. I reached for my belly and felt a small answer under my palm. I've got you, I whispered into the dark. It wasn't a promise. It was a decision. Sunday came like it always does. Ordinary light, the smell of coffee, the lie of normal. Hudson laced up for a golf game he hadn't mentioned yesterday. Try to rest, he said, kissing my hair. I will, I said, and the kiss landed like a receipt. When the door closed, I called no one. I opened the Voice Memos app and labeled a new file with today's date. Then I walked through the house and looked at the life we'd built, frames, shelves, the nursery we'd only talked about, and began to measure what was necessary to keep and what could burn. Some people say revenge is cold. I learned the temperature isn't the thing. Precision is. And precision takes stillness. It takes the steady hands I had now, the ones that picked up the pieces of a life from a hospital floor and saw not shards but instruments. By afternoon, the blueprint for my next move sat in a neat, numbered list. Evidence first. Allies next. Traps last. I saved the document and shut the laptop softly, as if noise could jinx resolve. In the quiet, my son kicked again, stronger this time. I pressed my palm there and answered him the only way I could. I hear you. If Hudson wanted a fresh start, I would give him one. Clean, permanent, and nowhere near us. He had misread me as breakable. He had no idea how sharp I could be when the lights hum and the truth hurts and the smallest person in the room needs me to be dangerous. That evening, when he came home and studied my face for signs of damage, I let him see what he wanted to see. A woman tired, hopeful, grateful, pliant as a promise. I kissed his cheek and asked what he wanted for dinner. He smiled, relieved, and that was how I knew he would never see it coming. I set my phone on the counter, tapped record, and asked him how the golf game had gone. He began to talk, too quickly, too many details. I dried a glass and listened. If he'd looked closely, he might have noticed a new edge to my silence. If he'd listened to the quiet between my questions, he might have heard the hum of a wire tightening. He didn't. He never did. And that was his first mistake. Romanos always smells like garlic and good memories, but tonight the scent clung to me like smoke from a fire I no longer believed in. We slid into our corner booth, the one beneath fairy string lights that had once seemed magical. Hudson ordered a bottle of wine, sparkling water for me, and performed the part of doting husband like he was rehearsing for an audience. To our son, he said, lifting his glass with a convincing smile. To our family, I echoed, letting the word carry more weight than he realized. My glass clinked against his, and I watched him swallow too fast, like he wanted to drown the taste of guilt. His phone buzzed on the table, screen down. He ignored it, but his jaw tightened. He made small talk about nursery colors, about how excited his parents would be, about baby names. Something classic, he said. William, James, names that last. I leaned back, keeping my tone casual. What about Theodore, after your grandfather? The suggestion hit him like a slap. His eyes flickered, and he laughed quickly, too loudly. Feels too heavy for a baby. I smiled sweetly, but inside I savored the win. He had forgotten how closely I noticed things. He had forgotten I was raised to watch for the tiny cracks in people's masks. Halfway through the meal, Hudson folded his napkin, unfolded it, folded it again. Cassia, there's something I need to tell you. The room seemed to lean toward us. I kept my eyes soft, my voice gentle. What is it? His mouth opened, then closed. He shook his head. Nothing. Just the future. We'll talk later. Coward. He couldn't even play the villain cleanly. When the tiramisu arrived, I pretended to laugh at some joke about sleepless nights once the baby came. Inside, I was memorizing the tremor in his hand, the way his smile cracked whenever the phone buzzed again. I had my own dessert cooking, and patience was the main ingredient. On the drive home, I leaned my head against the window, the city lights blurring like watercolor. Hudson talked about paint samples and stroller models. His voice filled the car, but I wasn't listening. I was cataloging every hesitation, every twitch, every guilty breath. At home, he retreated into his office for emails. I climbed the stairs, placed the ultrasound photos carefully on my dresser, and looked at the tiny face floating in grainy black and white. My son, my responsibility. Downstairs, Hudson's voice dropped to that low, urgent tone I'd overheard at the hospital. I crept halfway down the stairs, heart pounding, words drifting up. She suspects. We'll need to move faster. I pressed my palm to the wall and let the fury settle into something sharper. Rage was messy. Strategy was clean. Back in our bedroom, I opened my laptop. The glow lit my face in the dark. If Hudson thought he could plan my destruction, he would learn what it meant to play against someone who had nothing left to lose but everything left to protect. I pulled bank statements from our joint account. Jewelry receipts, hotel bills, dinners for two. I opened Florence's social media, posts from weekends that aligned too perfectly with Hudson's work conferences, cropped photos in familiar restaurants, captions about sunsets and secrets. I took screenshots, labeling them carefully in a folder named Baby Planning. He would never suspect. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Florence, how are you feeling today? Want me to bring lunch tomorrow? Surveillance disguised as friendship. I typed back, feeling good. Hudson's working from home, so I'll rest. Maybe another day. I added a heart, then hit send. The irony burned. She signed her betrayal with love. Hours later, Hudson slipped into bed. His phone lit up 3 times, short, frantic bursts. I didn't touch it, just memorized the rhythm. Florence panicking, no doubt. They were unraveling. I reached down, felt the flutter in my belly. My son's kick was small, but fierce. Don't worry, I whispered. Mommy has a plan. The next morning, Florence showed up unannounced, hair scraped back, dark circles under her eyes. She carried a bag from my favorite bakery, trying to play the same caring friend she'd always been. Blueberry muffins, she said, forcing a smile. Thought you'd like them. I invited her in, watched her avoid my eyes as we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd once comforted me through miscarriages, where she'd toasted my pregnancy with sparkling cider. How are you feeling? She asked, voice too quick. Good, I said softly, laying my hand on my stomach. Dr. Carter says the baby's strong. Might go full term this time. Her smile faltered. For a split second, I saw disappointment flicker across her face before she smoothed it away. I filed it like evidence. Cassia, she said, fidgeting with her cup. Yesterday, when you mentioned the father of my baby might be married, why would you say that? I sipped my tea, feigning thought. Just a feeling. You've been secretive. You seem guilty, like you're carrying more than just the pregnancy. Florence flinched. Guilty about what? I don't know, I said gently, but I wish you'd tell me. You know you can, right? Whatever it is. Her eyes filled, hands trembling. For a moment, I thought she might crack. Then she swallowed hard, plastered on a brittle smile. There's nothing to tell. I made a mistake with someone unavailable. I'm dealing with it. Unavailable. Married. Her lie was practiced, but her eyes gave her away. I'm sorry, I whispered, leaning closer. It must be painful, loving someone you can't have. Her composure slipped again. You have no idea. Actually, I said softly, I think I might. Her head jerked up. What do you mean? There was a time early in my marriage, I said, fabricating smoothly, when I thought Hudson had feelings for someone else. The way he looked at her, I could see it. Florence leaned in, desperate. What did you do? I told him to be honest, I said, eyes steady on hers, that I wouldn't be someone's consolation prize. Her face drained of color. And if it turned out he had been unfaithful, she whispered. I tilted my head, let the silence stretch. I'd be devastated, but I'd protect myself, protect my child. And if the other woman was someone close to me, that would be harder to forgive than the affair itself. Florence's hands shook as she set down her mug. I should go, she said suddenly. You just got here. I forgot. I have a doctor's appointment. She stood, already grabbing her purse. At the door, I touched her arm. Whatever secret you're keeping, I hope you trust me enough to tell me one day. She looked down at our hands, mine with a wedding ring, hers bare. A tear fell between us. I wish things were different, she whispered, then fled. I closed the door softly. My phone buzzed minutes later. Hudson, how's your day? I typed back, good. Florence stopped by. Pause. Then, oh, how was she? Upset, I said aloud to myself as I typed. She seems stressed. I think she's struggling more than she admits. Silence, then his reply. Maybe give her some space. Don't push. Perfect. His panic was showing. Florence was unraveling, and I was tightening the net, thread by thread. That night, I scrolled through the voice memo app, replaying every word Florence had let slip. I made a mistake with someone unavailable. I wish things were different. Not courtroom evidence, but damning enough in the right ears. The first piece of the trap was set. The house was quiet, but it never really felt quiet anymore. Silence had become the soundtrack of Hudson's lies, each gap filled with buzzing phones and late-night whispers he thought I couldn't hear. I sat at the kitchen table the next morning, a mug of lukewarm tea in my hands, Florence's visit still echoing in my head. Her words weren't a confession, not exactly, but they were a fracture, and fractures spread if you pressed on them just right. I needed proof, not just suspicions, not just intuition, but something undeniable. My laptop lay open before me, the cursor blinking like a metronome. I logged back into our joint bank account, scrolling slowly, carefully, like a detective savoring a crime scene. Jewelry charges in December, except I never saw a bracelet, never wore new earrings. Hotel receipts within city limits, billed on nights Hudson had sworn he was stuck in the office, dinners for two at restaurants I didn't even recognize. He wasn't even clever about it. That was almost insulting. I started a folder on my desktop labeled Baby Planning. Inside, subfolders bloomed. Bank statements, photos, social media. I screenshotted everything, arranging the puzzle pieces so I could see the full picture. Florence's Instagram was a gold mine, a girls' weekend in March that lined up with Hudson's conference trip. A cropped photo of a dinner plate I recognized from a restaurant where Hudson once told me the wait was too long for us. Subtle changes in her body before her official pregnancy announcement. Clues hiding in plain sight, waiting for me to stitch them together. My phone buzzed with another text from Florence. Thinking of you. How are you feeling? Need anything? It read like concern. It felt like surveillance. I typed back, resting. Maybe tomorrow. Love you. The lie tasted bitter, but her signature was worse. Love you. As if betrayal could be softened with endearments. By the time Hudson came home that evening, with a grocery store bouquet of daisies, I had arranged everything in neat stacks. He kissed my cheek, acting like nothing was wrong, and I smiled as though daisies could fix what he had already broken. What's the occasion? I asked lightly. Do I need one? He shrugged, setting them in a vase. Thought we could start looking at baby furniture this weekend. That sounds nice, I said, smoothing the petals with my thumb. Florence was asking if she could come along. She's excited about her own nursery. His hand froze around his coffee cup. That might be awkward. She's single after all. Don't want her to feel left out. Single. Right. I nearly laughed in his face, but instead I let my eyes soften with false concern. Maybe you're right. Still, she's been secretive lately. Different. Canceling plans, not answering calls. I lowered my voice, watching him carefully. I can't help but wonder about her baby's father. Don't you think it's strange? His jaw tightened. It's her business, Cassia. Of course, I said, rinsing a dish. But if the father is married, well, that would explain a lot. The silence was sharp enough to cut. Hudson stared at me, panic flickering across his face before he controlled it. He muttered something about work and left the room, probably to call Florence and warn her I was circling closer. I arranged the daisies in their vase and smiled. One push, and they both trembled. Desperation makes people reckless, and reckless people leave evidence. That night, I lay awake listening to Hudson's phone buzz on the nightstand. 3 short bursts. Panic texts, back to back. He didn't stir, but I memorized the pattern. When his breathing deepened into real sleep, I turned the phone just enough to see the previews. She's asking questions. What if she knows? We need to talk tomorrow. I smiled in the dark. Florence was unraveling, exactly as I planned. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Florence again, this time unannounced, clutching a bag of muffins like a peace offering. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red. I hope it's okay I dropped by, she said quickly. Of course, I said warmly, stepping aside. Come in. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where she had once held my hand through miscarriages, where she had toasted my positive test with sparkling cider. She asked how I felt, if the baby was kicking more. I answered calmly, resting my hand on my stomach. Dr. Carter says he's strong. I might go full term this time. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, disappointment, maybe both. Cassia, she whispered after a long silence, if you found out Hudson was involved with someone else, what would you do? I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Why would you ask me that? Just curious. I'd want to know, I said evenly. But if the other woman was someone close to me, that would be harder to forgive than the affair itself. Her face went white. I should go, she blurted, already standing. Stay, I said softly. Have another muffin. But she was gone before I finished the sentence. The moment the door closed, my phone rang. Hudson. Hey, beautiful, he said too brightly. How's your day? Good, Florence stopped by. Pause. Oh, how is she? Upset. I think she's struggling more than she admits. Another pause. Maybe give her some space. Don't push. Of course, I said sweetly. After he hung up, I opened my voice memo app. The recording of Florence's visit played back clearly. I made a mistake with someone unavailable. I wish things were different. Not enough for a courtroom, maybe, but plenty for the right ears. The pieces were falling into place. All I had to do was give them the push. The seed of suspicion had already taken root in Hudson's family. Now, all I had to do was water it. If I couldn't tear him apart with only my evidence yet, then I would let his own mother, brother, and sister start the work for me. Families destroy each other better than strangers ever could. Sunday morning, I dialed Eleanor, Hudson's mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with the kind of energy only a woman who loved control could carry. Cassia, dear, how are you feeling? Is the baby doing well? I injected a tremor into my voice, letting it wobble just enough. The baby's fine, Eleanor. It's Hudson I'm worried about. He's been working so late, out so much, and when I try to talk to him, he brushes me off. Sometimes I wonder if he's... I stopped, as though the thought hurt too much to finish. If he's what? Her voice sharpened. I exhaled shakily. If he's doubting the baby, or even doubting me. Silence stretched on the line, heavy. Then, like a blade slipping from its sheath. What makes you say that? I hesitated deliberately, then added, I probably shouldn't even bring this up, but something happened at our dinner party. Hudson and Florence seemed to have some understanding. They looked guilty when I mentioned it, and she's been so secretive about her baby's father. Florence Miller? Eleanor hissed, like the name was poison. Your maid of honor? Yes. I let my voice break. I don't want to think it, Eleanor. But I'm scared. What if I'm right? You leave this to me, she said coldly. I'll speak to my son. I thanked her, voice small, then ended the call with a smile that could have cut glass. Within hours, Hudson's brother Owen called, then his sister Angela. I told them similar stories, concerns about Hudson, about Florence's secrecy, about how he seemed trapped instead of joyful. Each conversation planted another thorn. By noon, the Smith family was a nest of suspicion, buzzing with questions they hadn't dared to voice before. At 1:30, my phone rang. Hudson. His voice was a storm barely held in check. Cassia, what the hell did you say to my mother? I blinked innocently, though he couldn't see it. What do you mean? She just called me, demanding to know if I'm having an affair with Florence. She said you told her I've been distant, that I don't want the baby. Where would she get ideas like that? I didn't tell her that, I said softly. I just told her I was worried, that you've seemed distracted, that Florence has been secretive. I thought maybe she'd know how to help me support you. Support me? His voice cracked like a whip. By accusing me of cheating? I never accused you. I let a sob creep into my tone. I only said I was scared, that I didn't know what to do. If I was wrong, then I'm sorry. The silence that followed was long and ragged. I could almost hear him pacing, dragging a hand through his hair, teeth grinding. Finally, his voice dropped low. We need to talk. Tonight. I pressed my palm to my belly and smiled. Of course, I'll be here. After he hung up, my phone buzzed again. Florence this time. Hudson told me what happened. Can we meet? I need to explain. I stared at the message, then typed back. Come over. It's time we were honest with each other. When she arrived, her face was pale and blotchy, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. I welcomed her into the living room, the very room where she'd once strung balloons for my birthday, where she'd laughed with me over wine, where she'd promised we'd raise our babies side by side. Cassia, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, you have to understand. Then explain it to me, I said evenly, lowering myself onto the sofa. She sank into the chair across from me, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. It started months ago. After David and I broke up, I was lonely, and he was there. He said he felt trapped, that you were only focused on getting pregnant, that he didn't feel seen. I never meant for it to happen, but it did. Her eyes welled with tears. I swear, Cassia, I tried to tell him to work things out with you, but then I found out I was pregnant, and everything got complicated. I stared at her, my expression carefully blank. So, you decided to lie to me, to smile in my face, bring me soup, hold my hand, while you carried my husband's child. She flinched. I love you. You're my best friend. I hate myself for this. But not enough to stop, I said flatly. She broke then, sobbing into her hands. He said he was going to leave you anyway. He said your marriage was over. I believed him. I thought if I didn't stay, he'd just find someone else, and then all of this would be for nothing. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Hudson's voice floated in. Cassia, I'm home. Florence's tear-streaked face went white. We locked eyes. The trap was about to spring. In here, I called calmly. Hudson appeared in the doorway, stopping dead when he saw us together. Florence on the edge of her seat, me serene with folded hands, his face drained of color. What's going on? He stammered. Florence was just telling me about your relationship, I said, voice like ice. How it started, how long it's been going on, about the baby. Hudson's mouth opened and closed, words fumbling. Finally, he choked out, Cassia, I can explain. No need, I interrupted. Florence explained everything, how you felt trapped, how you didn't want our baby, how you've been planning to leave me for months. His eyes went wide with terror, flicking between Florence and me. That's not... I stood slowly, resting my hand over the curve of my belly. The only thing she couldn't explain is why the two people I trusted most thought they could destroy me and get away with it. Hudson's lips trembled. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I smiled then, calm and razor-edged. No, it wasn't. But here's your mistake, Hudson. You underestimated me. Florence let out a strangled sob. Hudson took a step toward me. I stepped back. The air between us felt electric, dangerous. For the first time since that hospital corridor, I felt steady, in control. And I knew this was only the beginning. The morning after Hudson and Florence's twin confessions, the world outside looked unchanged. Sun rising over the street, joggers with headphones, neighbors waving as if nothing in the universe had shifted. But inside our house, the air had weight. I ate my cereal in deliberate silence while Hudson sat across from me, pale and hollow-eyed, his spoon clinking against the bowl like nervous tapping. We need to talk about last night, he said finally, voice raw. What about it? I asked, calm as still water. About what happens next, about how we move forward. I slid a manila envelope across the table. We don't move forward, Hudson, not anymore. He frowned, confused, until he opened the flap and saw the stack of legal documents inside. His face drained as he skimmed the first page. You filed for divorce. Yesterday morning, I said, spooning another bite of cereal into my mouth. While you and Florence were playing strategy sessions, I was playing mine. His hand trembled as he shuffled through the pages. Custody? Spousal support? You filed for full custody? I did, and a restraining order to prevent you from moving assets. My lawyer says I have a very strong case, given the circumstances. Hudson's throat worked as he swallowed. What circumstances? I stood and walked to the counter where I'd arranged folders in a neat, incriminating row. These, credit card statements for hotel rooms and jewelry, screenshots of Florence's posts, photos of your car parked at her apartment with phone records, and, I tapped the last folder, audio recordings. His eyes widened. You recorded me. You recorded yourself, I corrected softly. The baby you're carrying is mine, Flo. That's the family I want, not some obligation to a woman who cries about negative tests. I repeated his words slowly, letting them twist like a knife. Do you remember saying that? Because I do, and so will a judge. Hudson's jaw clenched. That's illegal. Not here. One-party consent state, I said lightly. My lawyer was very thorough. He sat heavily, head in his hands. You've ruined me. No, Hudson, you ruined yourself. I'm just shining a light on it. The phone rang. I checked the caller ID and smiled. That's my lawyer now. We're meeting to finalize next steps. You might want to call yours. Cassia, wait. He looked up, desperation in his eyes. We can work this out. We don't have to destroy everything we built. I paused at the door, studying him. What did we build, Hudson? Lies? Betrayal? A home where you wished our child would die just to make your life easier? His face crumpled. I never meant... You did, I said, voice sharp as glass, and now you live with the consequences. I left him sitting at the table, surrounded by his own failures, the envelope of documents in front of him like a death sentence. At my lawyer's office, Janet Morrison leaned over the piles of evidence I'd collected. Her eyes gleamed with something between admiration and calculation. You've done excellent work. With this, we can push adultery as grounds for divorce. That gives you leverage in property division, spousal support, and custody. The recording will devastate him in court. Judges don't look kindly on fathers wishing their unborn children dead. I nodded, steady. I don't want kindness. I want results. You'll get them, Janet said. The question is, how far do you want to go? All the way, I answered without hesitation. When I left the office, the weight of uncertainty had lifted. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival, for me and for my son. That afternoon, I drove to Florence's apartment. She answered the door with puffy eyes, cardboard boxes scattered behind her. Going somewhere? I asked coolly. My parents' house, in Oregon. She rubbed her swollen belly with one hand. I can't stay here anymore. I lost my job this morning. Someone sent my boss copies of my texts with Hudson. That's unfortunate, I said evenly. Her voice cracked. It was you. You destroyed both of us. I tilted my head. I didn't destroy you, Florence. You did that when you chose him. I just showed people the truth. My baby is innocent, she whispered desperately. Whatever you think of me, please don't let my child suffer. Her plea struck something deep, but I didn't let it show. Your baby will be fine. Hudson will pay support. My lawyer already filed. But as for you, I let the silence hang. You'll live with the choices you made. Tears ran down her face. I loved you. You were my best friend. Best friends don't sleep with each other's husbands, I said quietly. Best friends don't help plan each other's destruction. She broke down, sobbing, and I left her in her half-packed apartment. When I returned home, Hudson was waiting with his lawyer, a thin, weary man named Carter, who looked like he'd walked into a losing battle. Mrs. Rook, he began stiffly, your demands are extensive. My client proposes a fairer settlement, joint custody, 50-50 division of assets, modest support. I laughed. Absolutely not. Hudson's face flushed. You're trying to take everything. I'm taking what I deserve, I said coldly, as the wronged party. Carter cleared his throat. You may not have enough proof. I handed him a USB drive. Audio recordings, photos, statements, phone logs. Would you like me to play them now? The lawyer paled, glancing at Hudson. This complicates things. You think? I said. Here are my terms. 70% of assets, full custody, supervised visitation, 10 years of support at $5,000 a month, and a public apology. Hudson slammed his hand on the table. That's absurd. That's my offer, I said. Take it, or I make it all public. Your partners, your clients, the bar association, they'd love to know who they're working with. Silence fell heavy as stone. Carter shuffled papers. Hudson's breathing turned shallow. You have 24 hours, I said finally, standing. Decide if you'd rather lose quietly or in flames. Hudson took the full 24 hours before caving, and every minute of his silence was confirmation that I had him cornered. When Carter finally called my lawyer to accept the terms, the satisfaction wasn't sweet. It was steady, grounding, like a locked door clicking shut behind me. The house, the assets, custody, the monthly support, mine. And the apology, signed in ink, admitting to infidelity and abandonment, a scarlet letter he would carry forever. The papers weren't even dry when Eleanor, my mother-in-law, called. Her voice was tight, clipped. Cassia, I just spoke to Hudson. Is it true? Yes, I said softly, letting weariness edge my tone. I didn't want to believe it either, but Florence, she admitted everything. On the other end, Eleanor exhaled sharply. That girl. I welcomed her into my home. I trusted her. She was my best friend, I whispered. I trusted her with my life. There was silence, and then Eleanor's voice hardened. You'll always have our support, Cassia. You and the baby. It was a small victory, but one that mattered. Hudson was losing not just his wife, but the loyalty of his family. Florence, meanwhile, had already begun her collapse. A neighbor told me she'd been seen leaving her apartment with boxes, her hair unkempt, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. When I visited her one last time, she was surrounded by chaos, half-packed belongings, empty takeout containers, tissues scattered like white flags of surrender. You win, she said hoarsely when she saw me. This was never a game, I replied evenly. She shook her head, tears streaking her face. I loved him. I thought he loved me. Now he's ruined. I'm ruined, and you... Her voice broke. You're stronger than both of us. Not stronger, I corrected. Smarter, patient, precise. She laughed bitterly. Do you even hear yourself? You sound cold. Cold kept my son alive, I said flatly. Her sobs filled the silence, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not rage, just clarity. Back home, Hudson tried once more to appeal to me. He arrived unannounced, looking frayed, his once-tailored suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Cassia, please, he said, standing in the doorway like a penitent sinner. Don't do this. Don't destroy me completely. We can still... There is no we, I said, voice like ice. You already destroyed it. I'm just putting the pieces where they belong. He stepped forward, desperation in every line of him. What about Florence's child? What about mine? I folded my arms. Yours? You wished mine dead, remember? He flinched, jaw tightening, shame warring with denial. I didn't mean it. You did, I said simply, and words spoken cannot be unsaid. His composure crumbled. He sank onto the step, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, I almost saw the man I had married, the one who'd held me through miscarriages, who'd whispered hope into the silence of our grief. But then I remembered the alcove at the hospital, his voice dripping with betrayal, and any flicker of sympathy turned to ash. You should go, I said coldly. He looked up at me, hollow. You'll regret this. No, I whispered, steady. You will. I closed the door on him and leaned against it, hand pressed to the swell of my stomach. My son kicked, a fierce little rhythm that felt like approval. Over the next weeks, the fallout spread like wildfire. Hudson's firm quietly distanced themselves, clients pulling away. Rumors slithered through the community. Affair with his wife's best friend, pregnant mistress, divorce with damning evidence. His reputation unraveled thread by thread until even strangers whispered his name like a warning. Florence disappeared to Oregon to live with her parents. Her calls went unanswered. I had no interest in hearing her apologies anymore. When the final court date arrived, Hudson signed everything without meeting my eyes. His lawyer muttered about damages, reputation, futures lost. My lawyer slid the papers toward me with a subtle nod. I signed calmly, ink flowing like blood. Outside the courthouse, reporters lingered, but I ignored them. The sun was warm, my belly heavy with life, my future finally mine again. That night, as I stood in the nursery, I'd painted pale blue, folding tiny clothes into drawers, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was reclamation. Hudson thought he had planned the perfect betrayal. Florence thought she had secured a future, but they had both underestimated the one thing they couldn't calculate, me. And now, with my son's heartbeat strong beneath my ribs and their lives in ruin, I knew the war was over. I had won. The weeks after the court's decision felt surreal. Papers signed, assets transferred, custody secured. On paper, I had everything. But victory doesn't arrive with a parade. It creeps in quietly, like a dawn. You only notice once the room is already lit. Hudson had moved out. His once pristine suits were replaced with rumpled clothes, his confident stride traded for a shuffle when he came to collect the bare minimum the court allowed. He barely looked at me, and when he did, it was with hollow eyes that seemed older than his 32 years. One afternoon, I watched from the window as he carried a single box to his car. Inside, I knew, were scraps of a life he'd destroyed. Files, ties, maybe a photo or two. He slammed the trunk harder than necessary, then sat in the driver's seat with his hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. For a moment, I wondered if he'd drive away or simply sit there until the sun went down. Then the engine coughed to life, and he was gone. Florence didn't even get that dignity. She left in a hurry, her car loaded with suitcases, her body heavy with pregnancy. Neighbors whispered as she pulled away, but I didn't watch. I didn't need to. Her exile wasn't my doing, it was hers. But they weren't the only ones changed. I was too. I spent hours in the nursery, folding blankets, adjusting tiny onesies into drawers that would soon be rifled through in the chaos of new motherhood. I pressed my hand to my stomach and whispered promises to the child inside me, that he would be loved, that he would be safe, that he would never have to question if he was wanted. At night, though, when the house was quiet and my son shifted inside me, I sometimes thought about the woman I'd been months ago, the one who had walked into that ultrasound appointment soft, hopeful, trusting. She was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, more deliberate. It wasn't just revenge that had made me this way. It was survival. One evening, Eleanor came by with a casserole dish and flowers. She looked older than I remembered, her once perfectly coiffed hair threaded with more gray. She set the dish on the counter and turned to me with a steadiness that surprised me. "You did what you had to," she said simply. I almost laughed. "You think so?" She nodded. "Hudson was always too much like his father. Charming when he wanted something, reckless when he thought no one was watching. You protected your child. That makes you stronger than he'll ever be." Her words should have comforted me, but instead they felt like a verdict. Stronger than he'll ever be. Was that what I had become? Stronger, yes, but colder too. Still, I accepted the flowers, the food, the alliance. Enemies could turn into allies when the battlefield shifted, and I had no intention of wasting support. The nights grew longer, the baby heavier. I rocked in the nursery chair, humming lullabies under my breath, imagining the sound of tiny breaths filling the room. Sometimes I wondered if Florence did the same in Oregon, her belly heavy with the child she'd gambled everything for. Did she sing to her baby? Did she picture a future that didn't exist? I would never know. What I did know was this. I had secured a life for my son, a future built not on trust, but on vigilance, not on naivety, but on precision. Hudson had underestimated me. Florence had underestimated me. Even I had underestimated me. But now I knew exactly what I was capable of. And I would never let anyone threaten us again. Noah was born on a rain-soaked Tuesday in late October. The storm rattled the hospital windows, but inside the delivery room I held my son, slick and furious with life, his cries sharper than thunder. The nurse laid him on my chest, and all the noise in my head, the betrayal, the lies, the months of planning, went quiet. It was just him and me, my boy, my reason. Eleanor was the first from Hudson's family to visit. She stood at the foot of my hospital bed, her eyes wet, her hands clasped too tightly together. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "He looks like you." She didn't mention Hudson, and I didn't either. That silence was its own kind of truth. When Hudson arrived 2 days later, the room chilled. He held flowers, but not his son. He stood awkwardly, staring at Noah in my arms, and for a flicker I saw something, longing, maybe regret. Then it passed, shuttered behind the same mask he'd worn for months. He gestured vaguely toward the baby. I shifted Noah closer. "Supervised visits will be arranged," I said quietly. "Not here, not now." His jaw tightened. He set the flowers on the table and left without another word. Back home, the house felt different. The nursery glowed softly at night, the pale blue walls reflecting the warm lamplight. Rocking Noah in the chair, I breathed in the scent of his skin, memorized the rhythm of his tiny breaths. Every creak of the floorboards, every buzz of my phone, every shadow at the window, I noticed it all. Motherhood had rewired me. Hypervigilance wasn't a choice anymore. It was instinct. 3 weeks later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Florence. She looked exhausted, thinner, her belly gone, a bundled infant in her arms. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice fragile. "I named her Grace," she said. I glanced at the sleeping baby, then back at Florence. "That's a lovely name." She shifted her weight, her face crumpling. "Cassia, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but our children, they're siblings. I thought maybe, someday, they could know each other." Her words landed heavy. I studied her, the woman who had once been closer than a sister, who had torn through my life with smiling betrayal. No, I said gently. Not as friends, but for their sake, someday we can be civil. Tears slid down her cheeks. She nodded, whispered, I'm sorry, and left. After she was gone, I stood at the window, rocking Noah, watching the taillights of her car disappear down the street. He stirred, curling his fist around my finger. You'll never doubt where you belong, I whispered. In the weeks that followed, Hudson's career collapsed completely. He missed child support payments, and each time my lawyer filed motions to enforce, his name became a cautionary whisper at his old firm. Florence stayed in Oregon, her parents helping her raise Grace. And me? I rebuilt. I returned to school, began sketching plans for a small business, poured every ounce of energy into creating a future carved by my own hands. No one would ever hold my stability hostage again. Late one night, as Noah slept in his crib, I stood in the doorway and watched his chest rise and fall. The garden outside rustled in the wind, the house quiet around us. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Revenge, people say, is best served cold. But they're wrong. It isn't about temperature, it's about precision. About making sure every consequence fits the crime. Hudson lost everything he tried to build on my destruction. Florence carried the weight of her choices into exile, and I had Noah, safe, loved, mine.